Welcome. So, some of the important developments and down to earth this time. First is rhododendron. Nagaland is known for various types of rhododendron, mainly along the Dzükou Valley region, which is one of the major tourist attraction. This is home to various species of rhododendrons, and the state flower of Nagaland is Rhododendron arboreum, which has bright red petals, and it's believed that if the bone of the fish is gets stuck in the throat, then this could be one of the remedies. The petals of this flower could be one of the remedies. Many of the species have been declared under the classification of vulnerable, but there are other species as well, mainly around the Zufa mountain and the Jakma area, which has become one of the major tourist attraction, and this aims to get a status from UN for establishment of a rhododendron park in the region. The next is the region between Red Sea. As we see this map, there has been an ongoing escalation because of the Hamas conflict which has been seen, and Houthis, which is one of the armed group in Iran, backed by Iran in the region of Yemen, is actually attacking the ships which pass through the Red Sea, mainly the oil and gas ships, and this is one of the routes from where most of the oil transport takes place. Now, nearly 12% and 5% of the total transport of the world goes through Suez and Panama, and this Houthis in the region of Yemen have been creating recent disruptions. The next is carbon border tariff. Now, UK announced a plan that any country which is having weak climate rules, UK would not actually have emission intensive goods like aluminium, cement, ceramics, glass, fertilizer from that nation. And there would be a carbon border tax which would start from 2027. Now, this has been calculated and built up, and this is a protectionist measure by the rich countries, violating the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, which we have already studied before. The next is, with the export bans and the rising food prices, there has been a high up inflation which has been seen. The repo rate has remained unchanged at 6.5, but still the bans are likely to continue, and the use of sugar has been restricted, specifically for ethanol production for domestic purposes. Similarly, there has been a reduction in the crop production. India is one of the second largest producers of sugar cane, but despite of that, we have to import sugar. Also, the rates of onion have reduced drastically, and that is because of the ban of onion in the export market. Now, that has created a special threat to the onion farmers, and protest has been going on from the region of Maharashtra. The next is Almora. This lies on the MBT, the main boundary thrust, and the region from western Nepal to Uttarakhand. This region had recently witnessed three earthquakes within this year, within the last year now, 2023, right? And this has been mainly because of the seismic disturbances. Now, Uttarakhand has two major thrusts, the South Almora and the North Almora, and they have never been a so far energy release point in either of these thrust areas, but the recent activities have called it a real challenge. The next is Chunav Mahakumbh. Year 2024 is believed to be one of the years where one of every two eligible persons across the world would be voting. 40 nations across the world would be going through the phase of election. If we include the states and counties worldwide, it would be 76 count. So many nations, and this is believed to be an era of polycrisis. Why polycrisis? Because there are simultaneously many issues rising up. One is, of course, the monetary disturbances. The second is the environmental degradation, climate emergency. There has been collapsing global systems, and the pandemic induced disturbances which have affected the overall structure. The next is Freedom in the World 2023. Now, this is 50th assessment by a US based political advocacy non-profit group, and this talks about understanding open society barometers, where 86% of the people want to live in a democratic state. Now, What are the imperatives and common challenges? Specifically, education, schools, hospitals, health infrastructure are some of the major issues that have been raised by most of the respondents. And this idea of polycrisis could be actually brought across by this same concept. Now, the next important issue is the states of southern India, Karnataka, Kerala, have been witnessing a turmoil in the food production, and that's mainly because the domestic mega herbivores like elephants, wild buffaloes, which were previously eating grasses, because of the weed which has been growing extensively like lantana, they have shifted to the consumption of the domestic or the vegetable production that is done, and this has created shortfall of vegetable, which is again a very important aspect to understand. Now, Idukki forest is one such example where we have lantana camara and Sena scaptabilis, which are two such plants. Now, these plants, when they grow, the chemical composition of the soil changes in such a way that other species cannot grow, and nearly 45% of the forest area is now choked by alien species. So, for example, elephant, which normally eats grass, trees, bugs, bamboos, is now forced to consume lantana camara and water hyacinth. But those are invasive species, and since elephant does not consume it, they move to crop farms, and these include the bananas, coconut, paddy, and sugar. So, reduction in the food production is affected. Similarly goes for rhinoceros. They have moved to potato, onion, pumpkins and carrots. Wild buffaloes move to rice, sugarcane and jute. And this has created a natural conflict. For example, Nagarhole National Park in Karnataka, in the last 3 years, there has been high number of wildlife intrusions into human habitations. And one of the major reasons attributed to this is the alien species growing there. Now, there have been various efforts made. For example, wild mangoes, black plum, jackfruits are planted in the buffer areas so that the species don't affect the native or the main crop which is present there. So fringe areas are being created where these kind of species are grown, and a special belt has been allocated for 15 kilometers from the foothills of Western Ghats to have nearly 65,000 fruit bearing species and trees which can be planted, and there can be a big plan which has been given for the same. Now, there are 11 high concern invasive species which have attacked 66% of the natural ecosystem in India. For example, bitter vine. This is one of the most invasive species from Pacific and affected the areas of Manas and Kaziranga. It is seen in the Himalayas, central India, and 13% area is invaded by it. The next we can see is mimosa, which is the giant sensitive plant from Central and South America with dense thicklets that can be seen. Again, the regions of Manas, Kaziranga, Valmiki reserves in Bihar and Karnataka, 14% area affected by it. Xanthium, similarly, in the regions of North America, Argentina, affecting the regions of Rajasthan, Andhra and Tamil Nadu, 20% area affected by it. And similarly, we have the species of pigeon nut, siam weed, lantana, as we said, mainly in the regions of Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, the Nilgiri region. Then you have sickle sena from South America. Prosopis julifera from South America again, Argentina again from Central America, and this has invaded most of the regions of Western Ghats and Northeast as well. We have goatweed, Congress grass as some other species. Now, each of these species, the details on these species are available in the handout, so you can cross check the details there. The next is the challenges. Now, a comprehensive legislation needs to be required to take action for the same. The next is Global Climate Summit in Dubai, which is held from November to December, talks about phasing out the transition and the creating rules for carbon markets. Negotiation for adaptation framework is again important. So there are certain key outcomes, which is transiting from fossil fuels. No mention of gas or oil phase down has been given, but yes, transition from fossil fuels to renewable sources of energy. There has been loss and damage fund which has been created by World Bank for 4 years, and all developing countries are eligible to be part of it. Adaptations include mainly the target and the financing and the technology. Mitigation again from various groups. Climate finance is another important aspect where we talk about new collective quantified goals to be established, and then carbon market under the Paris Agreement, which talks about climate changes without trading carbon credits. The next is methane. The countries actually accelerate or reduce the non-carbon dioxide emissions globally by 2030. There has been no quantifiable targets to reduce the methane emission. Now, what have been the initiatives? The initiatives have been pledges regarding the global electric cooking, global renewables, then you have coalition for high ambition, UAE leaders declaration, and the projects related to same. So this graph talks about how we have the target of 1.5 degrees Celsius emission, and the current policies and pledge aim to reduce this to a substantial level. So the global greenhouse gas emissions aim to be lowered down in the near future by 2030. Bird flu in Antarctica is another important concern. Now, birds have been showing lethargy, loss of coordination, and neurological twitching. This has been one of the most important ecological disasters. Avian species influenza H5N1 has affected the migratory birds, and this has led to a huge number of carcasses which have been seen in the cold areas. South China first identified it in the case of waterfowls, but now it has been seen in migratory birds and even found in the regions of Antarctica. The infection actually threatens the emblematic penguin species, which is the emperor penguin and Adélie penguin, which is in the far interiors of Antarctica, which creates a very important ecosystem in the region, right? The next is understanding the penguin species, which actually are some of the species which can nest or which live in a high density, that is, they live in colonies. So even if one is affected, there could be cases of mass mortality that could be seen across the colonies. Now here we have the cases where highly pathogenic avian flu influenzas have been confirmed, which is in the regions of Falkland Island. And then we have the areas which have been marked in green, which shows the areas where penguin colonies are there, and most of the penguin colonies are seen in the South Sandwich region and close to that. The next is there have been renewable power policies, mainly the National Repowering Extension. MSME Promotion Policy 2023 is another important one. The Bihar Vehicle Policy for electric vehicles. Besides this, there have been numerous developments besides those. For example, heat waves. The exposure to heat waves is aimed to increase significantly by 2090, 3 to 4 degrees higher by the end of the century. India is now again witnessing the JN1 strain of COVID, which has been important. The Char Dham Mahamarg Vikas Pariyojana has been passed without the EIA assessment, that's the environmental impact assessment. There has been global study on homicide report talking about disputes related to property, water and land, which has created higher number of murders in the recent years. The last HIV vaccine has been stopped because it was believed that this has not been effective and was administered in the region of Africa. This study, known as PrepVac, was studying two different vaccines on HIV for nearly 1,500 volunteers in the regions of South Africa, Tanzania and Uganda. Then in the then another news was talking about the indigenous population and its impact in the region of Brazil. The magnitude of 6.2 earthquake was seen in the regions of Gansu province in China. And then there has been a fund which has been started as International Fund for Animal Welfare, which has been brought in light of nearly 100 elephants which have died in the biggest national park in drought-stricken Zimbabwe area, the Hangwe National Park, which has nearly 45,000 elephants. And the season which has led to dry periods have created dehydration for these animals. So those have been some of the major things that we have discussed in this edition. Thanks for joining in, and yes, the handouts for these would be available at Exam Race Current Affairs section, so do check. The links for those are available in the description below. Thanks for joining in today. Have a wonderful day ahead.